All right, we're good.
All right. Okay, so here's the quote. He knows everything he needs to know and feels everything he needs to feel. When the day comes, he will be an unstoppable force for good.
It's
I love
so
it.
powerful.
I
I love it.
That's such a
Marva.
good one. That's
And
such a good one.
delivered from Brasso to from Marva to
Yeah.
through Brasso
Yeah,
to Cassian.
that is
So
perfect. Yeah.
powerful.
So anyway, welcome back everybody to the Star Wars Guys podcast. As you noticed, we are honored to have a special guest. We got Pete here with us from around the galaxy, joining us to come in on. He was nice enough to take the time to come talk some Andor, talk that finale episode that we saw, and we're ready to dive into it. I've been waiting all day to talk about this episode and just the season as a whole. So
Awesome.
Before we do that, obviously I want to get to Andor, but I want Pete, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, let everybody know where they can find you on social media, what all you got going on.
Sure. So I'm Pete Fletzer. I am the host of Around the Galaxy, the Star Wars fan talk show. I was lucky enough to have Mike on the show. What about 6-8 months ago? I guess it was.
That was awesome.
That was so much fun. We are part of the ATG Cast podcast stream. So we have on Thursday we drop our interview shows, and then on Friday nights we do a live show as well called Streaming Star Wars. Me and my buddy Nick Milkey and Chris Ryans, and we usually dig less into the shows of the week like you guys do, and more into kind of some of the news of the week, and kind of have some fun with that. We take calls from folks, but you can find us at atgcast.com or follow us on every one of the social media platforms, those that are living, those that are dying, at ATGcast. So
cover all your bases.
Yeah, you just never know which one's going to
nowadays.
Not on MySpace, but just about everywhere else, I think.
Yeah. That's great.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So guys, definitely, if you're watching live now or you're listening to this back, definitely make sure to check them out and give them a listen. They got some great stuff. And before we dive right into the Andor stuff, I always like to ask whenever we have a guest on that hasn't been on the show before, kind of what your journey is like. What got you into Star Wars? You know, what kind of sparked the whole thing, and how you got from that to where you're at now.
So as you can tell by the color of my beard, I actually saw Star Wars in 1977 as a 7-year-old child. My dad took me. And
jealous.
while I don't remember, I have a few brief glimpses in my head of remembering the movie, but not a lot. But what I remember most is actually driving home from the movie in my dad and mom and dad, they were together. It was a rare 70s couple. We were I was in the back of their station wagon, the way far back because safety was not yet invented, and I was sitting in the back pretending to shoot down TIE fighters that drove by every car. And then from that moment on, like my entire childhood, every big important memory seems to be related to Star Wars, whether it's having some of the illustration books and things like that I just was like drawn into, or memories with my best friend growing up. We shot an 8mm version of Star Wars, which was horrible, but it was we were
awesome.
10 years old. And but Star Wars was the center of our world. And then I was very fortunate enough in the 90s, skipping forward a bunch of years, to have done some freelance writing with Steve Sansweet for the Star Wars Galaxy magazine.
Sure,
and
I thought I saw that. Yeah.
So I was cool. I was managing editor of a section called Around the Galaxy, oddly enough, for a couple of issues, and through that I just was so lucky to be at the New York City premieres, the prequels, and got to go. I visited the ranch, which is like one of those things that's such an amazing, lucky experience. And I'm so, I never take that for granted. When I throw that out there, I almost feel bad about saying it, but on the other hand, I'm like,
no, you got to.
I know people who are fans
are
like,
they're
like, you were there, yeah, I was there. But so it's been a part of my life, and now, I know, Mike, you have a son, but I don't know what you need, but I do to I enjoy Star Wars with my son, and my most favorite recent experience was going to Star Wars Celebration with my 75-year-old father, who introduced me to Star Wars, and my 10-year-old son, who I'm introducing to Star Wars. The three of us, the three Fletzer men, were all over Anaheim. So
the generations.
That's awesome.
That's so cool. Yeah, we were going to ask you about that. I was going to ask you about Celebration. What was that?
Yeah, when we had last talked, You had
Yeah.
said you were going
I
with
was
your son and
prepared.
your
I
father,
was
so-
the most prepared I've ever been. I even had the celebration.
Oh, look at that!
That was-
He's got the
That
titles.
was next up. I was
he
ready.
had it.
It's funny. It's the short version of the funny story is because before the pandemic, that was when the tickets went on sale for. I had never been to a Star Wars celebration. I've been a Star Wars fan forever. In fact, worked with Dan Manson and Scott Chernoff remotely when they did Star Wars Celebration 1. I had nothing to do with it, but I knew them at the time.
Yeah.
And that was one of those things where I was like, I should go to Denver for this, but I just didn't. Yeah, we bought the tickets, and I was going to take my wife and my daughter and my son, and it was going to be a family vacation to Anaheim. And my wife was like, look, if you don't mind, I really don't want to be spending the weekend with a bunch of nerds, so I'm going to stay home. I was like, that's fine. My daughter's going to go, though, and my son's going to go, and we're going to get this done. My daughter, who's now 13, was like, well, Dad, if you don't mind, I'm going to stay home with Mom. And I was like, all right, that's fine. But was able to, like I said, able to bring my dad. But it was just amazing because, sometimes we get bogged down in some of the social media negativity and not even just social media, but like you'll meet a fellow Star Wars fan and 90% of it is great, but then they'll throw something out there like, yeah, but Solo sucked and that was a mistake or whatever. Star Wars Celebration is actually the best thing to call it. I'm glad they didn't call it Star Wars Con or something because you will not meet a person who is anything but 100% positive and but realistic.
That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard too. That's awesome.
Some people are like, well, the prequels aren't my thing. It's like, that's totally cool, but they're not jerks about it. You know what I mean? But
not the loud ones you see on social media. Is what
correct. Yeah, exactly. And that's why I say anybody who's like Star Wars is dead, I'm like, yeah, but you don't see conventions the size of Star Wars Celebration filled with thousands of, what is it? I think it's like 40,000 people come through there over that weekend.
That's crazy.
And it was just great to meet a lot of people who I've met online and meet them in real life, which was very cool too. So
yeah,
that's so awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned this conversations nowadays. Whenever you see someone, and a lot of times Nate's the same way, and Pete, I'm sure you have some Star Wars. See the hat, you've got some Star Wars.
I should have worn mine.
Some merch, some different, some different clothing and hats and items and stuff. So a lot of times someone will come up and talk to you, and that's sometimes an entry point into, hey, there you go.
There it is. Matching
now
hat.
I'm feeling. I think nobody knows that I'm aligned with the Rebel Alliance. I know.
There you go.
I'm going to be getting Imperial rumors thrown around about me if I don't. I've got a Boba Fett shirt on. It's
not looking good, Mike.
Which used to be a little more sinister. Now it's you don't know. But it's funny hearing someone come up and start talking to you, and then it's, oh, you're a Star Wars fan, great, and then immediately, and I'm sure all three of us the same way. I'm like, which way is this conversation going to go? As far as, oh, you're a fan of those, except for the Last Jedi was rough, right? And I'm like, oh, well, no, I have to stop you there.
Except Captain Kennedy's got to get out of here,
right? But it's so funny because you realize and that's those that may know me know that I do tend to. I get into it sometimes on social media with people who take that really negative attitude, and primarily because honestly, it's because there are people who you have that sort of. I talk a lot about sort of the bell curve of Star Wars fandom, right? You have the far right side, which is where we are in that kind of super nerdy. Let's talk about details and the dimensions of Marva's brick, and we'll know all that stuff. But the most of the people who are Star Wars fans and the ones that frankly Disney cares about are the ones in the middle that are casual fans that buy a Grogu shirt because he's cute or an action figure because they have a grandson they want to buy him for. But that sort of fandom does get poisoned by, I mean, my dad, the 75-year-old father of mine, he called me one day and he's like, I read somewhere that they're reshooting the sequels. And it was like, where did you read that? He's like, oh, some guy named Mike Zero. And I was like, oh my God, Dad, we have to talk. Let me delete your browser history. This is not good.
It's time. Let's sit down and
let me give you a list of a couple of let me give you a list of a couple of accounts that you can take with a grain of salt, to be fair.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I was at a Dunkin' Donuts getting a coffee on Sunday wearing this hat, and the guy walks in behind me. He's like, Star Wars. I'm like, yes. So that's that's cool. I love that. Awesome. I love that. So
that reminds me, I was traveling. This was like maybe 2 months ago. I was at the airport and I had this shirt. Like, I had this shirt like after the first trailer came out. I was like immediately went on Amazon. I was like, let me find an Andor shirt. And I was walking through the airport and this person's like, yo, Andor, like calls out to me. I was like, didn't realize it right away. I turned around. He goes, where'd you get the shirt? I was like, I just got it on Amazon. He goes, like, that's sick, dude. I got to get on it.
Yep.
But yeah, you're right. People notice things and they're not afraid to speak up and say something about, merch and recognize and spark those conversations.
Do you guys find that you like? I always am never sure how deep and how fast I should go into those conversations. I'm like,
oh yeah,
all right, because like, and then then they're like, I sometimes if it goes beyond like 4 minutes, I end up mentioning the podcast just as and they're like that's where I'm like, okay, did I go too far? This is like,
I had him. Did I lose them? Yeah.
Oh, man. All right, bye, friend.
It is funny. I've had a couple of people who have started talking, Star Wars with me that I just see somewhere, and if they quickly go to one Gage had a couple of people recently, actually a husband and wife who was sitting there talking with my wife and myself, and they were like, oh yeah, we love the Bad Batch. I'm like, oh, okay, so you're that,
yeah,
which is great.
Right.
I love the Bad Batch, but it's like, so you're watching Bad Batch. That means you've probably watched Clone Wars.
We're not just talking Star Wars. We're talking Star Wars. Okay,
right.
let's go. Yeah.
Exactly. You don't just buy things from Target. You're really watching it. That's
you're
awesome.
invested.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
Fun. I see some people in the chat too. If you guys are watching live, welcome. Feel free to comment along, and as we dive into some of our conversations here. I also want to be respectful of your time, Pete. So if at any point you're like, we're going, I got to go, whatever.
Oh no, I'm good. The kids are asleep. The turkey is ready for tomorrow, and so I'm.
You're ahead of it. I like it.
I'm just hanging out, talking Star Wars, man. So absolutely, this will be fun.
It.
I also got to say that backdrop is pretty great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's
that is pretty sweet.
It's a little bit out of control. Yeah.
What's all on that top row you got there?
Those are all droids. I got R2, BB-8. I have our for our Friday night show. We have a droid that we created called R5 Drinkmore. So he's like an R5D4, but he's got and I got the Lego. I got the
so good.
I love it.
I got the Lego guy from Fallen Order, and so I got so those are all droids along the top. Yep,
that's cool. That's sweet. Yeah, I just recently got a couple Lego ones I still need to build. I got a Grogu I need to build. I got a Vader helmet I need to build. So
they're addictive, and I really it's funny. I first got them. I was like, I'll do these with my son. My son did one, and he was like, yeah, this is boring. I'm like, okay, no problem. I'll keep going. So I love them.
I did my first one. I think is it back here? The Scout Trooper.
Oh yeah,
it's up on the
I have that one. I love that one.
I started building it, and I was like, oh, I'll just start, work on it, get a couple things together. Like 2 hours go by, I'm like, I gotta finish it.
Yeah,
start to finish.
But what is it about Star Wars? Like we're adults, we're grown adults. We have children, we have jobs, we have responsibilities, and yet on a Saturday when we should probably be doing something important, we're like
before Thanksgiving,
right? I'm gonna kill a couple hours doing a Lego. And you're like, wait a second, really? That's your choice?
Right.
But it's so great and it's so much fun. And again, we could talk to each other about this because we know how crazy we really are. So it's okay.
Yeah. That's why we spare some of the other people when you quickly hear like, oh yeah, I've seen. What's the one with Darth Vader in it? I'm like, okay. I'm glad you like Star Wars at some level. That is great. And I don't know how to answer that question for you.
That's so good. Yeah.
Oh, man.
That's good.
All right. So we dive into some Andor?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's dive into some Andor. Pretty loose on whatever. We sometimes will jump from character to character, but we usually do like to start with just like overall thoughts. So if you've got overall thoughts, let's just maybe do like this finale episode, and then we'll get to the whole show. I guess the show as a whole. But Pete, what do you think? Overall thoughts, the finale episode of Andor.
I'll humble brag a little bit, and I hate to say it, but it's important to the story. A couple of weeks ago, I had access to this in one of the press screeners. So I've been sitting on this for like a week and a half, and the first time I watched it, honestly, I was like, that was good. That was solid. That was good. And then I've watched it now a total of 5 times, including an hour before you and I, the three of us got on. And honestly, every time I watch, and the same thing with all the other episodes, every time I watch it, it gets better. And I feel like this was actually the best possible ending for a season one. Um, I feel, one of my biggest concerns with any series, it's not even just Star Wars, it's like House of the Dragon and whatever I'm watching.
Sure.
My big fear is that when it ends, not that they're going to miss the landing, because whatever, that's bad writing is going to happen and whatever. But like, I worry that from a season one, they're going to leave it hanging too much. And I feel like if there wasn't a season 2 of Andor, we'd be good. I feel like we got a satisfying ending to season 1. I'm so glad season 2 is coming, but I feel like this was a satisfying conclusion.
For sure. No, I completely agree. I think the way they ended too, with the dialogue they had in that last line with
Yes,
Cass and Luthen, you're like, okay, so that's it. That's his step into the rebellion. But like you said, that could have ended it, and then that still connects to, there's some fill in the gaps, but that still makes sense connecting to, Rogue One. But
yeah,
the fact that we get a season 2 is just even better, because I want to dive in more with these characters.
yes,
But,
100%.
I agree. I loved it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I absolutely loved it as well. I think I have not seen it 5 times yet, Pete, but I will.
You will.
I will. I absolutely will. It was one of those things where I know we're going to get to, this is first, we're kind of talking about the finale as, individual, and then we'll talk about the show as a whole, but I think they're definitely connected. I mean, it's obviously connected, but the feeling I have in this, I'm just amazed throughout the entire season how well they're able to play with the tension of, I think sometimes prequels, you always have an interesting task when you're working in a sandbox where things that have happened before and some things that have happened after, but it's the journey of how do we get there. And this episode ending with him taking the step of like, kill me, I'm gonna butcher the quote, but I'm in, or kill me. So kill me or take me in.
Yeah.
And
There
I finally got there. I was very close to doing it in the wrong voice, which would be our classic Luthen voice, which is not an impression I do. We just gargle. It's just
as in Andor.
Everything.
Yeah, that was
a little tangent,
speech.
which we do on the podcast. But I love that there in some of those early episodes, he gave us a Cassian Andor, which was so strong of like not Andor, but Andor. That I was like, does he really know his name? And then a different time, he's like, Andor, the thief. And I'm like, oh, he does know his name. He just likes to say it different.
It's classic Star Wars.
On hand.
Exactly.
I love the way that we knew that a lot of the major storylines were going to, we're all coming back to Ferrix, and we knew that the funeral was going to be the place. But I love the surprises there, not for surprise sake, but I love the way that Cyril and Dedra's story takes its next step forward in that.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah,
in that very interesting interaction. We'll dive into the individual things, but that and I love when judging a show or a film, the way that it makes you feel like emotionally. And I could listen to Marva's speech. I wanted to join the rebellion myself, just sitting and watching that.
You're next to the guy throwing bombs. Great.
I know I'm the only one on this cast without a rebellion hat, but it's going to change after Marva's speech today. I just love it so much. Oh, I couldn't have enjoyed it more.
Yeah. No, I mean, I thought it was great, but it's like you're saying, and we've mentioned this a lot on, our previous episode reviews of Andor, but the dialogue in this series is just so like, it doesn't matter who's on screen. I'm on the edge of my seat listening so intently to every word that's being spoken, because it seems like so intentional. And we've joked about this, I think, on our last episode of like, I wouldn't say Star Wars is probably the most known for just like such intentional dialogue, right? We've got some sand quotes and things like that we joke about now. But this, I think that's part of what makes this series feel so Star Wars, but also different. It's like, it's very intentional. I think that adds a little bit of that high quality to this show. not just visually, but the actual dialogue, like everything everybody's saying is just so intentional, because it almost is like you're watching. It's like secretive. Like if anybody else hears this,
Right.
like they have to be precise with their wording and stuff. And I like that. But.
Yeah, you had you guys mentioned the last lines of the show, and I think that it was interesting because when Cassian comes in and he says you came here to kill me, and then Luthen says you don't make it easy. So clearly he changed his mind. And then from there, he says, I don't recall what it says, but then Luthen says, what game is this? Because Luthen, which to me, from it as it relates to dialogue, this is the first Star Wars that you watched where you had to listen to every line. Like the whole speech, what was it, last episode or the one before, about, when he was talking to Lita about, not Lita, Clea, about the, we don't want to lose this artifact and blah blah. It was all double speak. It was all coded conversation. Most Star Wars, it's like, we got to get the plans of the Death Star to Alderaan. Okay, cool, let's do it. And that's great.
Flashing? Yeah.
Right.
Who's the guy from Phantom Menace who's just the pilot?
Oh,
yes.
Like,
and this entire planet is one city, and this is the thrusters. It's just it's Dr. Exposition.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But this, you're right. I mean, you guys were saying before too, it's I don't know if emotionally exhausting is the right way to put it, but it was certainly like it pulled you in, and the way Chris Ryan's my partner on Streaming Star Wars says, is like the entire time he's just leaning in the whole show. He's leaning in the whole show. And this show grabbed attention for 12 straight episodes with honestly not a ton of action. And that's a very different thing for Star Wars.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. You go ahead, Nate.
I was just saying, as far as the action goes, it really kind of did follow these arcs. And when we hit those points, that's kind of when we saw that action play out.
Right.
But you're right. It wasn't just every episode there's this, and then you can count on action here, but then some dialogue, and then rely on some action here and get everybody excited, and then some dialogue. It really was like telling that story, but also progressing every character to ultimately come back to meet Cassian at Ferrix and kind of have this final showdown, to end the season finale.
And a lot of people were talking about like the difference between Mando and this show, for example. And first of all, they absolutely should and can coexist in the same galaxy and really do work when you take a look at it. But what the big difference is, Andor was put together very much like a PBS drama, right? There was a lot of and that makes it sound very dry and dull, but it was very, as we were just saying, very intentional. Whereas every episode of Mandalorian is based on a video game approach to things. It's a quest. It's a boss fight, and then what's next?
And that's we need fuel. We beat the boss. We get the part.
Next level,
right? We level up. Yep. And that's awesome. And I love Mandalorian. And but this was just the way I look at it is just a different way to tell a story in a galaxy that I love to spend time in. So
it is. Pete, you hit it on the head there with my wife and I. I don't know if either of you guys have ever watched Downton Abbey. My wife and I watched Downton Abbey, or like even a show like Mad Men, or some of these shows that I remember years ago when Mad Men and Breaking Bad were on at the same time. This is a little tangent, but it makes sense. I'm a big fan of both those shows. Breaking Bad, but two of the best shows of all time, critically acclaimed shows. Breaking Bad, I remember especially when I was younger, viewing this probably a decade ago, at least when I was watching for the first time. It was very obvious when a lot of stuff was happening in Breaking Bad. It doesn't mean the writing was any better or any worse, but there's drug deals, there's explosions, there's shootouts. And I remember watching the first episode of Mad Men, and I was like, I really like that, and I'm not sure anything happened. It's in everything happened though. It was inner office politicking and all this different stuff. But this feels a little similar to that. There is action in moments, and then there's obviously some big climactic moments with the prison break and then even in this episode when everything comes together. But it's also I feel the tension, and I'm leaning in as much when I'm just listening to anytime Mon Mothma has has any scene with
Yeah.
Genevieve O'Reilly talking, you know, as Mon Mothman. She's talking to someone, and I'm like, is she going to get exposed? Is this the moment? Who can she trust? And I'm worried for her too. And then in this one, you know, when her driver starts listening, I'm like, oh no, here we go.
Yep.
So yeah, they just play on those so well, where it's all Star Wars, and yet I think you were the one who said it. They can all coexist, and in fact, I would argue that it's great to have the different. I think that if every show felt like Mandalorian, every single one of them, and just was a different time period or different story, I'm not saying it would be bad, but you would be like, oh, okay, we've kind of got the one flavor. And when you get, you know, you've got Obi-Wan, which is a different feel. You've got Andor, different feel. Now we've got Ahsoka coming. That's going to have a little bit of a different feel, I would assume. And
I mean, look at Boba Fett. That was one of the bigger criticisms we saw online, was that, oh, that felt like a lot like Mando.
Correct.
Or too much like Mando. They wanted it to be more different. A lot, you know what I mean? But
yeah, so it's one of those things. I'm so glad that we have all 4 of those live action shows so far, and with more on the way. And this show is, I think I said it before we started rolling, maybe, but forgive me if I'm repeating myself. But it's just from the very beginning, it's felt very confident in what it's doing. Like it has a deliberate pace. It has I think, and maybe some people found that's too slow for them. I didn't find that. I was on the edge of my seat just about every moment of this show, even in some of the early episodes that maybe people would say not as much happened. But it's deliberate pace because it knows where the story is going. It knows the amount of time it has. I think that's another thing. You can go a little bit slower when you have 12 episodes versus a 6 episode, you know, show. But yeah, for finale, just the way it wrapped up, but then also it wrapped up the conclusion of what we were seeing in this season, and then also leaves the room for, okay, but we don't know where this character is. We don't know where Luthen is. We don't know when does Mon Mothma get exposed or leave, and when does all that stuff happen. There's a lot of questions that are still going to be answered.
Yeah,
absolutely.
No, I completely agree. And you mentioned the speech earlier. I kind of want to dive deeper into that moment. I see Angry Tasty Cakes, first off, what a fantastic username, said the speech made me think I could dack it up and take on the Empire myself. I mean, the speech was powerful. And I think I even tweeted something about it earlier. If you noticed Luthen's face, and maybe this was just me and how I took it, but watching the speech, as soon as it concludes and it shows him kind of up above, you know, looking out, his face, he gets a little smile because he's recognizing what he, I think it's showing more of like what he's done has sparked this rebellion of people that are now standing up because of the actions that have been seen by what he's been a part of, but also because the direct correlation to Marva being Cassian's mother. It also, in that moment, immediately he turns around and starts heading back, you know, towards his ship after he kind of, it made me think, at least, and I could be off, but my first thought was, oh, he's not gonna want to kill Cassian at this point. He's gonna think his mom's was all in on the rebellion. Maybe Cassian will be a good person to bring in. Obviously, we get, you know, the kill me or take me in at the end, but I took that moment as a big indicator as to why he was open to, like, what is this game being played type of thing, and bringing him in at the end.
Yeah, there was some interesting cuts to, and again, I've watched it too many times and I'll still get it wrong, but they, you know, while Marva was giving her speech, there was a cut or two to Luthen just standing there. And, you know, again, this is because the show is so deliberate. You could tell, or to me, it felt like he was like, this woman's saying what I want to hear. This woman is like, he may or may not have known about, you know, that's one of the questions that I have for next season. Did he know Marva, and is that why he came for Cassian, and or was there any connection, or how did he hear about the rebellion that was going to happen on Ferrix, and maybe he didn't know it was coming, but just the fact that he was there and saw, you know, really the Boston Massacre moment of Star Wars, he was there for that. And how can you kill that woman's son at that point, especially seeing what he's gone through so far?
Oh yeah. And not question, you know, and how could you not even question, I think, if she thinks that he might be a great candidate to follow suit after hearing the speech himself.
Yep.
Knowing that they were looking for him, but they knew he was there because based off the Empire and the way they were reacting, they're like, oh, at least they believe he's here somewhere.
Yeah. So let me, if you don't mind, let me throw in one more thing at you about that speech, because I think I read somewhere, I thought I did, or maybe I imagined it, that Tony Gilroy said something about the fact that the last line of the show was going to mean something, or is going to connect somewhere or something, and what's interesting is the "kill me or take me in" line has so many meanings. I just, in the video that I dropped this morning reviewing the show, I talked a lot about that, because "take me in" is a recurring theme for Cassian. To say "kill me" or "take me in" sort of sounds like "kill me" or "arrest me," right? One of the two.
Mm-hmm.
But the way I looked at it was "kill me" or "take me in," make me a part of this. Luthen has switches to almost a father figure in that moment, because that smile you were just talking about, that smile was so telling. He was like, "It's my boy. He's going to do this. He's here with me." And Cassian has lost his family twice, right? He lost them as a young child, then he lost Clement and his mother. And then you go and you watch, you start to realize that one of the things that drives him is this needing to belong and needing to really have purpose. He says to Zahn before, in episode 11, tell her that she'd be proud of me, before he knows that she passed away. So that's so important to him. But I don't know if you remember his last line from Rogue One. His very last line from Rogue One is, "Your father would have been proud of you, Jin." So this was so important to him. And so "take me in" is not just, hey, make me a part of the rebellion. It's I need more from this. I need to belong to this, not just be a part of it.
That's good. Yeah. No, I think you're right. I didn't think of it like that, but I mean, like you had said, I initially took it as, take me in, let me be a part of the rebellion. But you're right. When looking back at the two families that he has lost, it really is not just, let me be a part of this to get back at the Empire. It's, I need that purpose. And when you mentioned that line of, she would be proud of me, let her know, that's when I'm like, oh man, you're right. That's deep, but so intentional. Again, relating directly to the line, his last line in Rogue One.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because the name of the show being Andor, it's not just about him, right? It's about his family and his mother, and which is kind of one of those really cool things that Star Wars shows do, is they're named. And Mike, you and I might have even talked about this when you were on the show with me, is, Rebels. I thought it was going to be some Rebels, but it's like, it's a Force and family story.
Yeah, exactly.
Clone Wars was so much more than just Clone Wars. And The Mandalorian, I still hold somewhere in my head canon and beliefs that The Mandalorian, it doesn't just mean that Din is that guy who's known as the Mandalorian, but he is the Mandalorian, and we're seeing that rise to rule Mandalore.
That's what I've been
in this story.
The whole time,
And so it's called it's called Andor. So obviously it's about Cassian, but he's not he's the lead character, but he's not the only focus. And Marva Andor is almost more important than him at this point in the story.
Yeah, it's something that Nate, I know you've heard me say it throughout the season. I'm not going out on a limb here, because I know a lot of other people felt this as well. But from the moment Marva was on screen, immediately I was like, she's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
There's so many, and it goes, again, a lot of it goes back to the writing and the dialogue, and the way, especially the way that she and Luthen's similar, as far as there are easier ways from a writing standpoint that they could have said and got across certain things, but the way that she says it is so much more profound.
Yeah.
And like the whole, again, this is now going back, a number of episodes, but when she's leaving and she's telling him, like, I can't go, and you can't stay. And it is like, in one sense, it is that kind of classic, not always, son and mother. Sometimes it's like, boyfriend, girlfriend, and it's like, hey, we should run away together. And then the next morning or later that night, they're like, oh, wait a second, we come to our senses. I can't go. I've got all these ties and everything.
Right.
But instead of it coming off in the like she could have just said that I can't go. I've I've got stuff here.
Yeah.
Instead, she gets into the whole, essentially a lot of the core of this first season for Cassian is, taking the step of, he says he knows what he's against, but he's never really known what he's for. And part of that is, with his upbringing and he's had his family taken from him and then he's taken in, and there's a lot of this finding your identity, finding where you belong, where you feel like you fit in, what are you actually about. And he's had to do a lot of things to survive over the years. But in the conversations with Marva while she was alive and talking with him, but then also when she's passed on, she's given the speech, and then also when he is given the information about what her final words were to him, about him being a force, for good, and how he can not just survive, but really take everything that, all of his skills and all in his heart and his passion for not just standing up to the Empire so they don't get him, but to save other people. It's exciting from a fan standpoint, because as the post-credit scene would tease us, he makes about as big an impact as you can possibly make, with saving lives there. But yeah, just the dialogue with those characters, and I love when she's talking. Well, I mean, we can get into all the different details, as we go here, but yeah, I could go on and on about Marva. I'm going to buy a Marva shirt. I'm going to make a Marva shirt just so I can wear it.
She really is so great, though.
She's awesome.
Like I wish we had, obviously, for the purpose of the story, she wasn't in a portion there of the middle. We got some more of the hologram there at the end, but I could have listened, like you're saying, I could have listened to her talk to Cassian all day. It was great, those conversations. I want to recognize too, we got Podcast of the Wills in the chat. Let's go. Welcome. Sorry I'm late. No,
thanks for watching.
Tuning in. Yeah. That's awesome. I wanted to ask you guys, both of you too. Karn and Karn, is it Deidre or Dedra? Because I've heard people say both. So classic Star Wars.
Yeah, I say Dedra, but it could be Han or Han.
Okay.
Right. I said Dedra, but
I've never known. I've seen people say both. But so Karn and Dedra, what's your? Well, we can start with Karn. This is one character I've just tried to get a read on the whole show. And I'm curious, Pete. Mike and I have already had some of these conversations on our previous. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the character, and what his kind of goal is, what he's thinking, I guess.
I think what started out as sort of a keyboard cowboy, the guy who's able to make the big decisions from standing in his office. So that whole first 3 episode arc for him, I thought we were going a different direction after that, and he just got creepier and creepier.
Really.
and I think that's great. I mean, I got some trouble on Twitter for saying that somebody like him and somebody like Nemec are in some ways not that different. I didn't put it that way, which is probably why I got destroyed on Twitter for it. But he's a drank the Kool-Aid, I'll follow the fascist regime, like if you bring it back to Nazi Germany, he's the guy who turns in his neighbors. But they portray him even more, whenever we hear about I hate to bring it up, but it's whenever we hear about something like another shooting or something, there's something that's really disturbed about those people, and I think they're going there with Karn. I mean, when he arrives at Ferrex and he sees her, he's like, there she is, and
it just immediately fixated on her.
I mean, nothing else mattered, and then the looks on both their faces when they're together at the end, like she's just as awkward and weird too, but she's I in a very different way. But he's creepy.
I couldn't agree more. Sorry, Nate. I was
go ahead.
To build on what Pete was saying there, I know we've talked about it we hesitated too, because we're like, I don't know if there's a better analogy or a better example, but it does feel like someone who commits one of those horrible atrocities of, like, there's something
like at any point could just flip a switch or something.
Yeah.
but it is, I think the show has been, I completely agree, very deliberate with then they showed him start to become like a stalker towards her, and she's like, don't come here, and he's like, oh, I just walk just for the chance of seeing you, and we're like, okay, buddy, back off. But then with the little hints too of like the stunted development and like this, like the man-child aspect of, I mean, I don't think it is coincidence that whenever I love a bowl of cereal as much as the next person. The fact that we only see him eating cereal with his mother,
right?
And she's like, sit up straight, fix your suit and all. And it's very much like this guy is, in his 30s or however old he is, and he is, he's like, even when Nate and I joked about on our previous podcast, even when he's taking like the essential like telephone call, and he's like, Mom, get out of here. Like, he's like, yeah, I'm on the phone.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
This is
get out of my room.
And the overbearing mom's listening in. It is all of these things that make your skin crawl of like, oh, I know the Empire. And obviously it's very obvious what Dedra is doing is evil. And and all that stuff is pretty plain. And then you're like, he starts off in a place where you're like, he says some things that for the most part, if in the right context, would not be a horrible thing, because you're like, oh, we're trying to do that. But it's like, he's a law and order man. Like from the beginning, he's all about like, is there anything you would sacrifice for, is there anything you wouldn't sacrifice for order, essentially? But then it takes this weird kind of personal turn of like, well, now I've been outed by them. It feels like the person we've made some comparisons that like, it feels almost a little bit of watching, the Joker, or Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, of like, well, now some things have happened to him too, and then it gets even scarier and more dangerous that he could snap at any moment.
And the challenge for somebody like him, I know a lot of people are saying, well, he'll become an ISB agent. He is too loose cannon to be an ISB agent. So I think what made his story may be going down a line, and if you know me at all, I am 99.7% wrong with all my predictions, but I feel like he's going down a road where
he's going to be an ISB.
That's good.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, good.
We can eliminate some possibilities here. Then that's good. Yeah.
But I think the challenge for him is, and the interesting, again, this is why the show is so great, because it does build character. Somebody tweeted this could have been a 2-hour movie. I'm like, well, no. I mean, yeah, the story could have been told in 2 hours, but it wouldn't have been great.
But
what we see with Cyril is he will reach a point where he doesn't fit either side, because he doesn't have the rebel beliefs, but the Empire, they don't want, he's dangerous, right? And
look, and she didn't really take him seriously at the beginning either. It's almost like, he almost like wants it too bad. They're like, dude, you got to be like almost more cool than that. It's like you want to fit in too much.
Right. He wants to get married on the second date. Yep.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I see some of these comments were killing me. It said, Ma, the meatloaf. To like, get out of here. I'm on the phone. But yeah, that's hilarious. But no, definitely, like, you're talking about the milk and purposely, intentionally portraying him as like a kid, even though he's not. And it really does make it more like sinister, his character. And so I think one thing that I thought was interesting, I didn't think about it obviously until this episode, but I took all these different characters they kept, going to, even though none of them were with Cassian, but they're all spread out because they all had interaction with him at some point. And we kind of figured, okay, if they're still showing their story, they're all going to meet up at some point. And we kind of see that with Ferrix here. But I think his was interesting because the whole time he's been the one most open about pursuing Cassian. Like, I need to get Cassian. That's like, so I'm watching it thinking, oh, his goal is just, he's got to hunt down and get Cassian for basically ruining what he had going. But then I realized in this one, I'm like, although that is part of it, his mission for this season has really just been getting back to Dedra and trying to get in with the Empire. Like, it's Cassian's the leverage to get there. Right. Cassian's leverage to get there, but it's really just like seeking her out.
And he's like that crazy fan who believes, if only I can get them to hear my song, they're gonna record it and they're gonna do it. He's like, if only I can get Dedra, if I can give her at Cassian, I'm in. Like that's my thing. And and I think that's what makes them so creepy. And I think the other thing that's amazing with the show on the flip side, the complete opposite, and now they met up again at the end, is Dedra. I don't know, I didn't catch all your earlier shows, but I know a lot of people I've spoken to, like, we were rooting for Dedra. We knew she was trying to get our boy Cassian, but I mean, she was so interesting. And then, man, I think it was when she was with Dr. Gorse, we're like, nope, screw her. She's done.
Yeah. You do that to Bix, we're out. We're out.
Yeah, you hurt Bix. All right, you're Yeah.
Dr. Gorse, what another creep.
Oof. This is a show full of just
I know.
You in a way, and this may, I don't want to take us off track, but it's interesting because it's a lot like the very first Star Wars film, in that there's so many. There were the main characters, and then there's these like Brasso and Pack and Dr. Gorse. I want the comic book version of their, the one shot of maybe Dr. Gorse. I don't know if I want to know. Yeah, I kind of know. He's cool in a creepy way. But just characters that you want to know more about, which you don't see that often anymore, which is very cool.
No, I completely agree. That was one of my questions too, with the way the finale ends, is like all of them, Bix and that whole group that he helped escape there at the end, and then he didn't go with them. Going into season 2, now I'm wondering, I feel like they were such a big part in this season that we'll see them again, because they kind of tease like he'll find us, even though his intention was not necessarily to find them. It's to, go join the rebellion or die, essentially. But I wonder how much of those characters we'll see, and if we see them meet up again in season 2, and what that would look like. Because like you're saying, these are characters that you're like, oh, I want the backstory. I want the comic of this guy or this gal. And like, I want to go all in. And so with having a season 2, I'm feeling the same way of like, how involved are they going to be? Because they're obviously out now. They have to leave Ferrix. They're essentially on the run. Bix is going to be on the run. Are they going to get tied up and actually work their way and figure out a way into the rebellion themselves, or what's that going to go? So it's like all these questions are going in my head. It's like, I want to see this story.
And there's so much to do in season 2. Like, and it was interesting too that Cassian once again made the decision, in an interesting way, kind of made the decision to, like, when he first left Ferrix, it was because he had to finish that deal, and he was doing it to try to come back. And now he's leaving the last of his loved ones for again a different cause, which is really it was so hard. I mean, how can B2 emo is just such a he had just 2 lines or whatever in this episode, and he was just honestly. So I was telling Nick, who's their podcast, The Wills, I was texting him while I was watching the 5th time, and I was like, I've watched this 5 times and I'm literally almost in tears. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, I was almost crying, they got me. Like, it's probably because my son was in the room, but when he sees Cassian and he just Cassian, and I was just like, oh man, I was just like, oh,
that broke me.
The stutter, it reminded me of Dio a little bit.
Like
the little stutter in the voice.
Yep.
And Cassian, I didn't get to see you. It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. And it just went. I mean, I freaking heard it from my son when he says, you take care. I have it here. I take care of Bix. I'm counting on you. And he's like, you always say that. I'm like, oh, damn, that just hurts, man. But we got to get B2 emo back because of my theory that parts of B2 are in K2SO. So somehow we have to get B2 back.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Does that mean we're also predicting a B2 emo demise to get parts of
which again, remember, I'm 99.7% wrong. So that's
man, the way that they have done droids in recent years of Star Wars is just off the charts. I mean, when you think of the different droids that we've gotten, I mean, people almost forget now. Is going a little away from Cassian, but obviously K2SO was huge in Rogue One and will be prominent in season 2 of Andor. But you almost, when you're walking through like a Target or anywhere and you see a BB-8, you almost forget that that's circa 2015, not 1977, because it's become such an iconic look. Like that, it's just
And that's the amazing thing about the sequel era we live in is that I remember when I heard the rumors about what BB-8 looked like, and I saw the first picture, I was like, yeah. I mean, yeah. And now I have one up there. When we went to Disneyland, my son built his own BB unit.
Yeah.
He chose a BB unit over an R2 unit, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah.
So tells you where at least his generation of fandom comes in on this stuff. So
yeah,
we did.
Right.
It's funny you said that, Pete, because months ago, it was around the time whenever the Oscars were, we did a podcast episode where it was myself and Nate and our uncle, our other podcaster, and his children. Yes, the other Star Wars guy, and his children. He has younger children, and they've grown up, been Star Wars fans, but especially their age, kind of perfect for growing up in the sequel era. And we did this just goofy night of Star Wars categories and awards and best actor and all these different things. And just as a test, it was interesting. Our uncle tested his kids beforehand and got all of their results, and every single category was from the sequel trilogy. So so every single winner, they're like, oh, best actor, they're like, it's Daisy Ridley, Adam Driver, or it's Oscar Isaac. And it was, and not that I have anything wrong with any of that, but it just, for anybody who thinks that there aren't huge that the sequel trilogy didn't have, or the current Disney era of Star Wars doesn't have a big impact on people.
Huge.
It's not everybody, not everybody saw A New Hope first, and that it's interesting. I had friends of ours, actually from our church, who I was talking with Star Wars a little bit, who the first thing they ever saw was The Mandalorian. And I was like, really? That's so fascinating to me. And they were like, they saw a Mandalorian, they saw Mando, and then they were like all in, they dove in and watched. And I was like, really? I was like, first of all, bravo. Who got you to watch Mando?
Yeah,
and you don't know anything else.
Also, who told you to start with that?
I think they were just like, they heard about Disney Plus and were Disney fans, and they were like, oh, we're going to watch this Star Wars show. I was like, all right, awesome.
Baby Yoda does it again.
He does.
Baby Yoda keeps on doing it.
No, that is interesting though, because even with Andor, people want to, talk about, and I don't know the analytics. I have no idea, but you see things online and people are like, oh, the numbers are down, not as much viewers. I mean, obviously Obi-Wan Kenobi it's Obi-Wan, so it's going to draw on a big audience from the prequels and just even the originals, with Obi-Wan being a main character throughout all of Star Wars.
Right.
But I had an encounter the other day. Every once in a while we'll mention Star Wars encounters that happen throughout the week. And I'm coaching a 7th grade basketball team. I'm helping coach a team. And one of the players, after I heard him talking about, movies and stuff, Marvel stuff. And I was like, oh, so you're a big, movie guy. He's like, yeah, well, I'm a big movie and TV show guy too. I'm like, okay, what's your favorite, what's your favorite thing right now? He goes, well, honestly, my favorite show is this one called Andor. And I was like, on the inside, I was just melting. I was like, yes! I knew I liked you.
You're like, practice over. Everyone else go home. We're gonna
I knew I liked you.
Everybody run laps except you, kid.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Everyone else on the line. You're good though. But it hit me though, because I was like, this kid's like what, 13, and so I'm like, people saying, Andor's for technically maybe an older audience. Things they not understand or something like that. It's interesting though that the era of the age group growing up with the Disney stuff, it's still their favorite stuff. They're loved, like so many people, maybe not everybody, but there's still a lot of people really enjoying and liking it. And I think we don't hear a lot of those voices because they're maybe younger or not on social media and things like that.
Yep.
Yeah. Andor, for what is it? We talked about, I'm trying to think of different character plots. We usually like to go through every character. Is there any character specific or plot we haven't touched or we might be missing you guys can think of?
I think I want to throw, I said before we got on that there was something that I noticed this time around with a character, and it's Mon Mothma. We didn't dig too deep into her tonight, but, and I think that's also, literally she had 4 minutes in this episode or something. And but so the first time watching it, where she's yelling at Perrin for gambling, and we get confirmation that Clovis is or Corvus is a spy, right? Because he's listening, even though he believes, and then goes back and reports it. I think that was a setup. I think my theory is they knew that he was listening, and so they had this conversation, because when Corvus goes back and talks to Blevin, he says something about, they were fighting about gambling debts, and then Blevin says, well, they have made some interesting money moves or something like that. Was she sort of beginning to cover her tracks by showing this?
I think so,
because I think Perrin has to buy in that Perrin probably does not really care either way if he marries off his daughter. This guy,
yeah,
the richest man in Chandrilla. Yeah,
right.
Go ahead, you can marry my daughter. So I think he's okay with whatever he has to do to make that happen.
Yeah.
And I think it's the first time we've seen them working together in the series.
And it works because it's also believable that Perrin would do that.
Right. Every one of us was like, yeah, Perrin's a real.
It's funny you say that, because it makes me wonder too, like, was he in on it, or did she just go and he was just like, no, I didn't do that?
That's a good point too.
I don't know
whether he was in on it or not. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. No, that's interesting, because I didn't even think. I mean, I thought potentially that could have been something that they were intentionally trying to get him to hear. But thinking of it as a cover too, for the money that they know that they might notice as a red flag, it's a perfect way to set the seed of like, oh, okay, there's stuff going on, but we kind of have an idea of what it could come from because he's gambling, and if that's all it is, we don't care.
Right. If it takes the heat off for a little bit, it works. Yep.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to talk about Mon Mothma as well. I think her character, even though, like you said, we didn't get a lot of time with her in this finale specifically, so interesting. Even just the looks, like we get a look of her on the couch, or I think one of the last scenes we see of them, taking the daughter to meet the younger boy.
Yeah.
You can there's so much that she tells in her face and expressions throughout this whole show, because a lot of it is secretive. She's surrounded by these other parties where she can't just openly speak and express what she's actually thinking,
right,
or her actual emotions, but you can see it in the way that she's having these sly conversations about things throughout the whole show. I was like, man, it's just so, and it's kind of what we were talking about earlier, just on the edge of your seat, watching intently with everything that they're saying, every look, and you can see it in her eyes, like she's doing this, but she hates it.
Yeah.
And I think the
line that hit me the hardest from her was when she says, I'm in so much trouble, Val. Like, I feel like that's the first time she's ever said it out loud too, and just been like, oh my God, what am I? Because she can't talk to Perrin. There's nobody else she can talk to. And she blurts that out, and you can just tell it like it's a knife to the heart. It was, but again, that's Genevieve O'Reilly, just the way she delivered that, and the look on her face. I think that I was going to say she was the best actor, but the reality is there was not a bad performance. Look, we could argue that like, Carl Weathers is always over the top in Mando, but that's okay. It's not going to win him any awards. Everybody in this show, down to Brasso and Pack and the background ISB officers, just like, oh man, give these guys all awards. This has been amazing.
Seriously, like I pick any of them. Like I just everybody I thought was phenomenal performances.
Even old school Yularen coming in and giving a nice speech.
I love that.
It's oh man, there's so many. There are so many. If there was ever a Star Wars show that deserves acting Emmy nods, this show is. I mean, not even to mention Diego Luna.
Right.
Especially as the season went on, when his character is really going through the transformation even more and more. Kuno Loy. I mean,
right.
My goodness.
Seriously.
Wow.
Man, there was I loved the show. But in the final thing on Mon Mothma, like we were just talking about, Mon Mothma was such. I mean, I was excited to learn more about Mon Mothma. I always love getting in different mediums, and I love getting know more about her. What's so interesting that the show did that I hadn't really thought about as much, but it was really evident when you see Mon versus Luthen versus Saw versus, like, I love the when are we going to stop arguing with people who agree with us? This the actual fear that I had never really thought about with Mon Mothma as being someone who actually significantly has a lot to lose.
Right.
And I know in one of the early episodes when she's like, "Who do you think's the first to fall?" Like it's I'm really putting my neck on the line here, and their family's sitting pretty. She doesn't need to be doing this for her own for her own sake. But the way that they play the tension of we have to make this move. We have to make a big move. Luthen, did you do this? I didn't know you were doing. Did you do this behind my back? Did you do your own thing? Is this the right time to make the move? Yeah. Whose move was it? This whole like we're on the same side, but we're going about it different ways.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I've just always thought of growing up with Mon Mothma, I'd always thought of she's the leader of the rebellion, and she's like, let's rally the troops, guys, let's go. And this is a much more realistic approach to it, I think, than any revolution in actual history doesn't start with just one person going like, hey, you guys don't like this, right? Well, let's rise up. All right.
Yeah.
there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, I mean, in Hamilton they do that, but other than
Hamilton, Hamilton, they literally rise up. Yeah, that's right. I could poor choice of words.
But it's interesting too, because with Mon Mothma, you're right. I mean, a question somebody raised to us last week on our show was, how would Mon Mothma have handled the Krieger decision? Luthen was like, it's a necessary evil. We got to knock those pieces off the board. It's
I
like
know.
a game of risk. Would Mon have done that? I mean, she was.
Yeah.
She's if you think about it, she's really the only one that brought the horrors of war to life in the original trilogy by saying, many Bothans died to bring us. Like, I think that's the first time watching Star Wars where you're like, oh yeah, like good people are dying. It's not just the stormtroopers and background characters. Like, oh wow, okay. So that's in her heart, and I wonder how she would have handled the Krieger piece.
That's a great point, because when you grow up focused on Han, Luke, and Leia and Lando, we're like, the rebellion doesn't seem to be taking many losses. Like, they're surviving.
They seem to get away pretty easily.
Getting promoted, destroying multiple Death Stars. This is, there's a lot of people paying the price behind the scenes.
Yep.
One other fascinating thing, just talking about this Mon and Luthen and just the Krieger decision. It also was so interesting. I know we're going a couple episodes back now, but the Luthen Saw conversation, we had always speculated. I know just in our podcast, Nate, we've talked about, almost like a hierarchy of who's the most extreme, or like who is it that we know where Saw ends up. We know that Saw crosses some boundaries, and we know that eventually they're like, listen, he's gone too far, and there's this divide. But it's so interesting seeing Saw talk to Luthen, and he's like, "You do that to Krieger?" He's like, even Saw's like, "Dang, you're going far." And Luthen's like, I don't want to, but you got to do it. Yeah.
It really does make me wonder if part of the Saw we see later on in the future is because of stuff that he learned, I guess, for right or wrong reasons from Luthen. And how extreme he is at times.
So one of the things that Tony Gilroy said about season 2 is that it's going to feature the challenges of sort of the original sort of rebellious approach and the new guard. So I wonder if I would love to see why Saw becomes so paranoid. I think those were the first steps, but I would love to see, what if the rebellion just continues to screw him over, which is by the time it gets to Rogue One and he's like, you're here to kill me. And like, this is Jyn Erso. She was with him. She like, he saved her life. Why would he be there at that? Why would she be there at that moment to do that? And it's just so, when you watch Rogue One, sometimes it strikes me almost how pathetic a character Saw is, because he trusts no one. That's why he's got that big weird octopus thing. But I mean, that's such an interest. It's almost like Apocalypse Now. Like the guy, he's just like
Mhm.
he's
Yeah.
seen too much and he doesn't know what
Yeah.
anything means anymore. And in a way, he becomes useless because of
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah. And the threat on both sides.
right. Yep.
Like,
Yep.
and I think that touches a lot on what Luthen in his speech a couple episodes back mentioned is like, I'm cursed with using the tools of my enemy to
Yep.
against them. Like
Yep.
I had to give up my morals, you
Yep.
know, and that's exactly what we've seen. And I think what's funny is you see a little bit of that, not necessarily rubbing off, but almost being forced into Mon Mothma's hand now
Yeah.
with the decision of her daughter. Something she doesn't want to do, but she's now gotten to the point where she's deep enough in that she's being forced to do some things that otherwise she wouldn't do or wouldn't want to do. I wouldn't say that's as extreme as sending 50 men to a trap and die like Luthen's doing,
Yeah.
but it is a kind of a, and I don't even know if we'll ever see Mon really get to that point. At least obviously she becomes a leader of the rebellion, but making those decisions or those calls, I don't know if we'll see that or not. But it is interesting to kind of see that it's leading her down this path of having to make hard decisions, even like Luthen and everybody else is doing.
Yeah, and it's when Saw rattles off the human whatever all the different factions and sects of the rebellion. Like I think where Mon will need to come in is to try to take all those and make it an alliance of it's the Rebel Alliance is what they call it.
Yeah.
So we even saw it with the Ghost Crew. They didn't know where to go and what their role was yet too. So it's kind of I think Mon will come out of that. But to your point, like I think she was an idealist, again, not to bring real life politics, but you wonder what some of these young idealistic and look, I call myself an extreme moderate, so I don't take sides here, but like a liberal sort of young, bright-eyed person who's like, I'm going to do this for the right thing, and then faced with the realities of what that means, once you've just once you're being bullied on the playground, once you decide that you're going to take that first punch, now you're in. You might not have thought that taking that swing at the bully was going to get you was going to make anything happen, but now you're in it.
Yeah.
Right. How are you going to deal with this fight? How are you going to go with it? And so from that perspective, I think she represents that. I mean, Luthen, as you were saying, Nate, he's made his commitment 15 years before. He's been doing this since day one. She, an idealistic senator who's now like, yeah, no, this is real. This is a problem.
Yeah. And I think I think you're exactly right. And I think one of the differences we see between her and Luthen is Luthen has come to terms with the idea of, I'm doing this for, what do you say, like a sunrise I'm never going to see.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Whereas Mon gives off the vibe of like, I'm doing this, but I'm doing this to change things and for things that I will see still happen. Like I still want to make a difference enough and quick enough now. And even if it is playing that political figure that she is, it doesn't seem like she's gotten to the point where Luthen is like, I'm going to do everything I can for something I know I'm never going to, like, almost like hopelessly giving everything he has to the extreme.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's not quite there. Those are differences between those two characters.
And I think that's what makes them it's such an interesting dichotomy, because of the fact that she is I know which in a way it's a commentary on that type of person. And I think a lot of us get that way too in this world, where we're like, this is what should be done, right? It would be great if, free healthcare, let's do free healthcare. And that sounds great. And I love the concept, but then you're like, oh, wait a second, that means higher taxes. Am I willing to do that? And I know that that's not the same as deciding to spend 400,000 credits to blow stuff, but it's like, I believe this is the right thing. So I think Mon Mothma is really that kind of, that yes, this should be done, and we're seeing through her eyes what happens once you start down that hill and realize that your biggest cause is you fight for a cause for a reason. You don't just tweet about it, right? So,
I think it's it's funny you said that, Pete. The something sounds like, of course, sounds very good or noble, or just even like you have a good plan. I think it's an old Mike Tyson quote who said like everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah, I think
yeah, exactly.
Because it's like I think he's being interviewed and they're like, oh,
That's
so and so
true.
has a plan to not, to beat you. It's like everyone has a plan to get punched in the face, and then the plan goes out the window and it's survival mode.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting when you've got Luthen and then and Clea, and you're trying to see.
Yeah.
There's sometimes where she's even like smacking Luthen in the face and like, listen, you're going soft. And I'm like, whoa, Luthen's
Yeah.
soft? Like
She's another character that's super interesting to me. But
yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like they're putting characters like her on the board to be used, in episode 6 of season 2, just to be like,
yeah.
I mean, even down to just, I mean, this show, sorry, we're bouncing all over the place. I apologize.
No,
This is
that's kind of
our
typical.
podcast.
That's what we're known for. So
It's
you're
just
good.
people
It's
talking
perfect.
Star Wars.
This is
But one of the things the show did so well was I remember when I watched the first couple episodes of Black Mirror. Do you guys watch Black Mirror?
I haven't
I
watched it all the way
I've seen a
through.
couple
Yeah.
episodes,
Yeah.
but not all the way
Same.
through. Yeah.
One of the things that I loved about Black Mirror was like there was never anything just done like there was a quick scene at the beginning of one episode where the guy is trying to get a candy bar out of the machine didn't work, and I was like, oh, that's just a thing. But later in the show, like by knowing that happened, it's like, wow. So this show has done that with Brasso, with Pack, with all these little which is why I think Blevin is going to come back big in season 2. I think we're going to get, I don't know what's Nate, you were saying before about all the people who got on the ship and went to the moon, whatever that was.
Yeah.
You got Jezzy, who we only met 2 episodes ago, and we didn't really even meet her. She's just kind of there. We know she's doing something. Brasso, we want more of, and B2, Bix, and I guess it was Pack's son made the trip too, right?
Yeah.
What's going to happen with them? I feel like they're on the board for a reason, and I just don't know what it is yet.
No, I completely agree, and I think that's part of why it's so like again, it's kind of what you said earlier. If they didn't leave so much on the table or like a huge cliffhanger, like you said, they could have wrapped up right here, and it all makes sense.
Yep.
But it is the characters that are like that on the side that I'm like, oh, what is their role? Because they were big enough, but it wasn't Cassian who were following, like to the extreme in terms of main character story. But it's enough that I'm like, it feels like they've got a bigger role to play, or at least more story to be told come season 2. And what does that look like?
Yeah. Yep.
But
so good this show.
There was one other thing, and I again, I want to be respectful of your time, so I don't want to. We could talk Star Wars all day, but you mentioned something about Mon Mothma and the idea of the Rebel Alliance being an alliance, and I think that what this show has done for me, and I didn't think it really clicked until you had said that. Growing up, you watched the original trilogy, and like you said, you think the Rebel Alliance, you got Mon Mothma, and it really is rebels. Okay, they make a call, they go do their attacks, they make their strikes. They're all in coordinates. They're rebelling against the Empire, but they're all on a cohesive plan. Yep. This is showing, and I get that it's the beginning of a lot of that, but it really is showing Luthen's doing something, and Mon Mothma doesn't know what's going on.
Right.
Mon Mothma's doing something, and Luthen's not aware. Like they're all on the same side, but they're still throwing different. Some people are more extreme, some people are less extreme. Cassian doesn't know what he's doing yet until at least throughout this show. And so it really is like the beginning of the Rebel Alliance. They're all fighting for the cause, as they say, as they try to convince Cassian, but they're still all really doing a lot of different things.
And they're coming at it from a different angle. It's like different perspectives at what's. And this is my theory, again, wrong all the time, was that I believed that Luthen was bankrolling Saw. That was like my theory. And to see that he wasn't, and then at the same time see that Mon Mothma had no idea what was going on. To your point, Nate, that made me realize, this is truly a bunch of different rebel cells trying to work together or not even trying to work together. They don't even know what they're all about yet. They don't all that. And I think that was what was cool about Nemec's manifesto when he said something to the effect of, all these coordinated or uncoordinated things, and one day it's going to be one too many, and that's where the cracks going to give the Empire. I totally paraphrase that, but Nemec recognizing that there's rebellion is out there, but it's all being done in different ways in different parts of the galaxy and bring them together. So is Mon Mothma sort of the great sort of compromiser or something that brings everybody together?
The Flex Seal.
Yeah, right. Right. I mean, because even in Rogue One, when they're all standing around the table, they're all not on the same page. So
you've got the great, what is she proposing?
Yeah.
Love it.
Yep.
Just the shouting.
Yeah. But you're right. That's exactly where I was kind of going with it. It makes sense. Obviously there's more story to be told, but in my head, it makes sense how Mon Mothma becomes that head figure, because maybe she is the one that's able to say, all right, if we're going to do this, if I'm outed now at this point, we're going to do this. Let's be an alliance. Let's be on the same page. Let's be strategic about it. Make good plans. No more sacrificing. And that's kind of building up to what we see even in the sequels of like, we're not going to fight. I think Rose says it, like, fighting. What is it, Mike? You know this quote. You say it all the time. About
that's
destroying.
That's how we defeat. That's how we beat them. Not by fighting not by destroying what we hate, fighting what we hate, but saving. I don't know.
Saving what we love.
Saving what we love. Yeah.
Whereas right now they're nowhere close to that. Right? They're sacrificing people left and right to try and stay secretive because they're trying to build up.
Yeah.
But Mon Mothma, I feel like, is the reason we kind of maybe see her step into that role as the face of the Rebel Alliance is not just because she's, a high status political, famous figure around the galaxy, but also because utilizing those skills, she's going to be able to bring everybody to a cohesive plan and strategy and come together for the Alliance.
And I think she's going to also be of the mindset that I didn't sacrifice my daughter for this mess, right? I mean, I think you guys watched Rebels, I imagine, and so that one episode where Saw and Mon Mothma are sort of having it out in front of the base, and I haven't watched Rogue One since the show started, but I did see the clip of Genevieve O'Reilly talking about Saw Gerrera, and the way she says, he's been unconventional, whatever it is, and the way she kind of looks off to the side at Cassian when she says it to Jin, you're like, these guys have seen some shit together. Like, and I'm not dealing with that guy unless we absolutely have to. And so but I think that's like, she's like, he's a necessary evil, but I'm going to lead us so that we use it right, and I'm not going to give up or whatever.
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. The more we see people sacrificing things, the more they're going to want to stray away from doing those things and start realizing we can't continue to go down this path. At some point, enough's enough, and we have to be big enough and strong enough to act without, our own casualties.
Yep.
But
so cool. Who would have thought Star Wars would have us talking about this, right? I mean, think about it. When we first saw Star Wars movies, it were like awesome laser swords and robots,
space
and
wizards
stuff. Yeah. And now we're like, but is human sacrifice, what is the toll of war?
Right.
It's just like, wow. Okay.
Right. Yeah, no, super deep. I think we covered most stuff. Again, I don't want to take up too much time. There's a funny comment here by Jack. Jack Kino's a template for Snoke that they captured and then going to use him for experiments. Imagine. I joked when I saw that, and I was like, oh, so that's where Mando's going with season 3, taking Kino or some sort of Grogu blood, and
we're gonna see some sort of flashback to pulling Kino Loy off the shores,
right. Preserving him.
All of a sudden, he's got a nice little scar because he hit his head he tried to jump and he hit his head on a rock or something, and then it all connects. Yeah,
I saw a funny tweet. There was a photo of the Snoke clone in a jar from Revenge of the Sith. Or Rise of Skywalker, rather. And it says, I can't swim.
That's good.
Perfect.
Oh, that's good.
That's awesome.
That's good. Well, last thing here I got, unless you guys got anything else on Andor, anything we missed or anything you want to,
I mean,
just
overall,
up in a minute.
So excited for what they did with this season. I mean, I'm so happy to already know a lot of times these you don't always know that season 2 of a show is coming, and
Yeah.
I think it definitely helps it helps the creators. They know what they can tell in season 1, knowing what they have to do in season 2, and everything. Tony Gilroy, I love every single time I open Twitter. I'm like, Tony Gilroy's talking more about Andor, which is great. But he's just telling us everything, which is awesome. Bigger, I think he said bigger and bigger and bigger is what the story is getting for season 2. So I know it'll be a little while, but I can't wait.
I know.
Can't wait.
I know.
It's
Can't wait.
awesome.
And the time will be a little different, right? Season 2, the little time frame every few episodes is going to jump or something like that.
Every story arc is a year, I believe.
Yeah,
that's right.
Star Wars, it was funny. At Star Wars Celebration, him and Diego Luna were on stage, and he talked about that. It's going to be 4 3-episode arcs, one for each year leading up to he says literally leading into the first scene of Rogue One, which is very cool. So, but it was funny because he said that they were doing a second season already. What's going on with my camera? Holy cow! Is that happening on your camera too? It's
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway,
it looks good here.
Yeah, it looks fine.
Oh, it does. Okay, good. I don't know what's going on with my screen. Tony said on stage, he's like, and we're going to do a season 2. And Diego Luna looked genuinely surprised that it was like he didn't know, like they didn't tell him.
Like, really? Okay.
As soon as I talk to the guys, like he's just like, I just gotta. Yeah.
Well, it makes sense, honestly. The way it wrapped up, he probably shot that and thought, "Oh, I'm in the rebellion." That makes sense. That's it.
That makes sense. It leads right into the next movie. Yep,
that's it. Last thing, just something not necessarily Andor related, but I thought it'd be fun to close out here. Pete, this one's for you. If you had to pitch a Star Wars film,
oh boy,
it could be anything new, anything you'd want to see, era, whatever it is. What are you pitching? What do you want to see?
Oh man, there's so
we give
much.
you an easy one, right? As you're about to leave.
Yeah. I think this will probably get me some guff. But first thing is, I would like to see Rey and Finn and Grogu as the new sort of film story, probably sort of a tales of the Skywalker Academy or whatever they want to call it.
Sure.
The main thing though, and I think it was Mike Chen who wrote Brotherhood. He was on my show a couple of years ago before he even knew he was writing Brotherhood. Wow. And we were talking, and he said the biggest mistake that the sequel trilogy made was calling them episodes 7, 8, and 9. Just because what that ends up doing is it puts so much pressure on it to be directly connected. So that movie that I will pitch with Rey, Finn, and Grogu will not be episode 10. It will just be the continuing story of blah blah blah. So that's my pitch. I don't know. I like have no story details in there, but I certainly don't want them looking for Palpatine again. I want them
somehow he's returned again.
Somehow, Bib Fortuna returned.
He's even fatter than ever this time. Every time he comes back, he gains like 300 pounds.
Like his 5th reincarnation. That's very funny.
That's good. I like it. It. I mean, what was that recent news that came out about a potential? I don't know, Mike. You know all the news about stuff that was going around, and maybe
who was
movie writer's room or something.
Yeah. You're talking about with Damon Lindelof. Which I think in people always take stuff and then on Twitter you'll see confirmed Daisy Ridley is coming back.
Right.
What it really said was
production began today.
It's like it was like Damon Lindelof is in charge. Is heading a new Star Wars film, and they had a writer's room, I believe, sometime soon after Star Wars Celebration. They had a little writers convention, and potentially the story could take place after episode 9. And so from that, people kind of, I think, went with Adam Driver's back. Yeah. Like, well, maybe, but
I'd love it.
I think it'd be great.
It'd be great. That'd be awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome. I would obviously remake the sequel trilogy with deep fake actors and No, I'm not,
Yeah, do an animated version of the entire prequels.
I'm not gonna even recite some of the terrible pitches I've seen from Star Wars channels, but no, yeah, it's Nate. Do you have one, or was this just for Pete?
No, I just like to pick, see what
Because
people's thoughts are. So I like it. I mean, that's kind of, you've heard mine. Mine is I grew up, I love the
oh yeah, you're going you're going Old Republic.
Yeah. I love Knights of the
cool.
Old Republic. I love all that. So I've really enjoyed playing those and being a part of that. So
yeah,
that era, it's free to do whatever they want, But I'm also down for any continuation story too, because I like the characters we got. So
yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
No, I was gonna say I'll take whatever comes next, but yeah, I think that's why Acolyte seems so interesting, because
I can't wait.
Area, So
yeah, that's all I would have said. Is just I would love. I even kind of consider that a new era, as far as even if you went the post episode 9, just because we don't know,
right?
We don't know what comes out after that. I think that the as much as I've loved so much of the things we've gotten, it would be nice to get one that doesn't feel like it's got a wedge right in between a particular time period.
Or remain tied to Skywalker, like kind of tell its own.
Give the creators some freedom to
sure.
To do with it as they please, and not be in jeopardy of, well, that was different than the comic, or that was
right. Oh, right.
Yep. Yeah. Just have some room to do your story.
That's awesome.
My ideal Star Wars film is one that comes out.
Let's start with that.
Let's just do that. Because honestly, let's not get picky. Yeah.
So it's like you're just over there. Well, I need at least 9 more. I need a whole nother. Give me another saga.
I'm glad you asked. Here's my whiteboard.
One that comes out.
This has to happen, and if it doesn't, I'm canceling it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much all we had. I like, Andor. Can't wait for season 2. Love this first season. I've been saying it, but felt really different, but also very Star Wars, original Star Wars, but also new in areas and fresh. So everything about it, I really enjoyed. Before we go, Pete, do you want to remind everybody? I know you started at the beginning with where everybody can find you, but let them know again.
Yeah, sure. You can follow me on all the socials at ATGcast. You can find our show and our website and our YouTube channel all at atgcast.com. And that's really the best ways to find me.
Perfect. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, definitely. Like I said, if you're watching live or you're listening to this back, I know a lot of you all listen to this back. So definitely check them out. Show them some love. We love growing the community, the Star Wars community. It's a lot of fun. Always talking shop, talking Star Wars. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
We just want to say also, and thanks for coming on. Like, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
I'd be happy to come back on anytime you guys want me. So thank you. This was a ton of fun.
That's great. That's great to hear. We'll have to have you back on for sure.
You got my number.
Yeah. The No Expectations podcast right there.
It's
on and talk.
This is the only thing I think I sent you, Mike, for our interview is basically, here's a couple of voices that you do that I like. So let's try to make that happen.
Yeah, that's great.
It's so cool to just have that Star Wars convo. So thanks for having me. This was great.
Definitely. Like I said, we really appreciate you having or us having you on. So we thank you for your time. It's a blast. It's always fun. So with that said, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We appreciate it. We'll catch you all in the next one. And as always, may the Force be with you.
Cassian Andor.
Cassian Andor.
Luthen Grab.